He was praised for his genius, called a visionary, an architect shaping the city's future. But while others marveled at his buildings, he knew the truth. He couldn't even enter some of them on his own, not without a ramp, not without help, not without swallowing a little more pride each time, because Aarav Mehta was designing masterpieces in a world that forgot about people like him. For years, he stayed quiet, telling himself it wasn't the time, that maybe beauty and access just couldn't coexist. But then, one question shattered everything he thought he knew about design. And for the first time in his life, he wasn't just building for others, he was building for belonging. What did she ask him? And how did her voice reshape his entire life's work? Aarav Mehta always saw the world differently. As a child in Mumbai, he didn't play with blocks, he arranged them. Each line had purpose, each corner whispered possibility. His notebooks were filled with sketches, spiraling towers, curving bridges, homes that felt like hugs. While other kids imagined being superheroes, Aarav imagined cities that made people feel safe. When his family moved to Chicago, he carried that dream across continents. He earned a scholarship, learned English fast, and fell in love with architecture all over again in the shadows of skyscrapers. But everything changed one rainy night when he was 17. A car accident left him with a spinal cord injury and legs that no longer moved. Suddenly, the world he loved became a maze of no access, stairs only, and come back with help. He told himself he wouldn't let it stop him, and it didn't. He graduated top of his class, got hired by a prestigious firm, and by his early 30s, his designs were winning awards. But the irony was unbearable. He could envision the most elegant atrium, yet struggle to enter his own office bathroom. He brushed off the tension, told himself he was lucky just to be here, that maybe someone else would fix the accessibility flaws. But deep down, he felt like a guest in the buildings he helped create, invisible, compromised, and he wasn't alone. He just didn't know it yet. Not until someone much younger and far braver held up a mirror to his own silence. It was supposed to be a proud day. Aarav stood beside the scale model of his latest project, a sleek performing arts center designed for elegance, not clutter. The boardroom was filled with executives, investors, press, but one guest changed everything. A little girl, dark hair, soft voice, seated in a wheelchair next to her mother. She rolled forward and pointed at the miniature theater. "Where's the ramp to backstage?" she asked. Aarav blinked. He hadn't added one. He hadn't thought to. He glanced at the floor plan on the monitor. Backstage was only accessible by stairs. The room went silent. Aarav opened his mouth, then closed it again. The little girl looked up at him, eyes wide with curiosity, not judgment. "Can someone like me go back there too?" Arav's chest tightened. He mumbled something about revisions and moved on, but his mind didn't. That night he couldn't sleep. He sat at his desk long after midnight, staring at the design. He saw it now, what he'd been blind to for years. This wasn't an oversight. It was a pattern. His buildings weren't built for people like her, or people like him. And the worst part? He had stayed quiet, because somewhere deep inside, he had accepted that he didn't belong either. He deleted the design, not out of shame, but as a promise. From that moment on, his buildings wouldn't ask permission. They would open their arms. But could he actually convince the industry and himself that accessibility could be beautiful? After that night, Aarav didn't just redesign the theater. He redesigned his mission. Gone were the days of neutral tones and generic access ramps added as afterthoughts. He dove into the world of universal design, not as a checkbox, but as a creative challenge. What would a space feel like if everyone could use it beautifully? He read everything, flew across the country to observe barrier-free campuses in Finland, sat in cafes, watching how elderly customers struggled with heavy doors, how parents lifted strollers over steps, how delivery workers bent awkwardly to reach intercoms. He started asking different questions in meetings. What if the entrance wasn't hidden on the side? What if restrooms weren't labeled accessible because they all were? What if we made design that didn't make people feel like accommodations? His colleagues were skeptical. Clients raised eyebrows. Isn't that going to cost more? They'd ask. But Aarav pressed on. His first big redesign was a neighborhood library in a diverse Chicago suburb. It had been scheduled for demolition. He convinced the city council to give him a chance. And when the doors opened 8 months later, people wept. The space didn't feel clinical, it felt alive. There were reading nooks with adjustable seating, quiet rooms with sensory-friendly lighting, curved shelves and wide pathways that invited wandering. Children who had never been able to join story time now raced ahead of their parents. Elderly neighbors lingered longer. Teens in wheelchairs filmed TikToks on the ramp that wound like a ribbon through the center. The media called it a masterclass in inclusive design. But Aarav didn't care about headlines. What mattered was a note he found taped to the wall. Scrawled in child's handwriting, it read, "Thank you. This place feels like it was made for me." And yet, as his vision grew, so did the resistance. What happens when Aarav's dream for true inclusion clashes with a system still stuck in the past? Aarav was gaining recognition, but the more he pushed for true inclusion, the more walls he ran into. And they weren't made of concrete. When he pitched a fully accessible redesign of a beloved historic theater, he was met with blank stares and then backlash. "It's a landmark," one board member insisted. "We can't alter the structure." Another whispered what Aarav had heard before, only this time out loud. "Let's be realistic. Not many people in wheelchairs come here anyway." Aarav's stomach dropped, because he knew why. "They don't come," he replied quietly, "because we never built it for them." The room went silent. Then someone chuckled. "Look, it's noble, but people come here for beauty. We can't turn it into a hospital." Aarav left that meeting shaken. His hands trembled as he wheeled himself out of the building. It wasn't the rejection. It was the realization that the fight was bigger than design. It was about mindset, and changing that would take more than sketches and slogans. He almost gave up. Almost. But then an email arrived. It was from a retired actress who had used that very stage decades ago. She now used a walker. She'd read about Aarav's rejected plan. And she wrote, "I haven't seen a play in 12 years, not because I didn't want to, but because I can't climb the steps. Your design gave me hope. Even if they said no, you said yes, that matters." That message became his anchor. He doubled down. He founded Studio Unbound, a collective of architects, most with disabilities, dedicated to building beauty without barriers. And their first independent project? A cultural hub in Milwaukee, designed by and for everyone. When it opened, the ribbon was cut by a girl in a wheelchair, the same girl who had asked him about the ramp all those years ago. And this time, she rolled backstage first. But even as his career soared, Aarav still wrestled with something deeper. Had he done enough to heal the part of himself that once stayed silent? For years, Aarav believed that being a great architect meant erasing parts of himself. That if he wanted to succeed, he had to design for a world that wasn't built for him. But the truth? The moment he stopped trying to fit in was the moment his work began to truly stand out. He learned that accessibility isn't a feature, it's a philosophy. And inclusion isn't a ramp, it's an invitation. Looking back now, Aarav doesn't measure success by how tall his buildings rise, but by who feels welcome inside them. Sometimes he visits that first library he redesigned. He watches kids wander freely, grandparents navigate without fear, teens with canes helping their siblings reach books. And in the quiet, he smiles, not because the space is perfect, but because no one in it feels like they don't belong. And when people ask what made him change his entire career, he doesn't mention the awards. He doesn't mention the backlash. He simply says, "A little girl asked me a question I couldn't answer. Now I build spaces where no child ever has to ask it again." If Aarav's journey touched you, don't let it end here. Share this video, because every one of us deserves spaces that don't just tolerate difference, but celebrate it. Tell us in the comments below, what's one space in your own life that could become more inclusive? Your voice matters, and your experience can inspire change. And if you believe in stories like Aarav's, stories of quiet courage, innovation, and triumph over barriers, subscribe now to Able in Every Way. Let's keep building something beautiful together.